Welcome to Barbara's Bulletin, the podcast where we bring you the latest news and updates from around the world. I'm your host, Barbara, and I'm glad you're joining me today. We're starting off with a significant story from Kenya, where thousands of protesters have taken to the streets to mark the one-year anniversary of anti-government protests that turned violent in 2024. The demonstrations last year resulted in the deaths of at least 60 people and many more disappearances, sparking widespread outrage and calls for accountability. According to reports, protesters have planned marches across the country to honor those who lost their lives during the protests. However, there are concerns about potential violence, with police blocking major roads leading into the capital's central business district and government buildings being barricaded with razor wire. The protests last year were sparked by a series of proposed tax increases that many saw as excessive and unfair, particularly given the country's already struggling economy. While President William Ruto eventually scrapped the bill and restructured his cabinet to include opposition figures, deep resentment against the government has continued to simmer. In recent days, there have been fresh demonstrations over the death of a blogger in police custody, with 6 people, including 3 police officers, being charged with murder. The incident has further fueled public anger over the use of force by security agencies and raised questions about the government's commitment to protecting human rights. As we follow this developing story, it's essential to acknowledge the complexities and nuances at play. While the right to peaceful protest is a fundamental one, it's also crucial for authorities to maintain law and order and protect citizens from harm. We'll continue to monitor the situation in Kenya and bring you updates as more information becomes available. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the protests in Kenya? And how do you think the government should respond to the concerns of its citizens? We'll be right back with more of today's top news on Barbara's Bulletin. Welcome back to Barbara's Bulletin. We're diving into a crucial topic that's been making headlines lately: the War Powers Act and its implications on presidential authority. As we explore this complex issue, it's essential to consider multiple perspectives and understand the historical context. The War Powers Act, passed in 1973, aimed to establish a system of checks and balances between the executive and legislative branches when it comes to military action. However, over the years, its effectiveness has been called into question. Some argue that the act has been watered down, allowing presidents to exert too much power without congressional oversight. On one hand, proponents of a stronger War Powers Act believe that it's essential for Congress to have a more significant role in authorizing military interventions. They point out that this would prevent presidents from unilaterally deciding to go to war, potentially leading to unnecessary conflicts and loss of life. For instance, the act has been cited as a factor in the decision-making process during the Vietnam War, where Congress eventually cut off funding, bringing an end to U.S. involvement. On the other hand, some argue that the president needs flexibility to respond quickly to emerging threats, and that the War Powers Act can hinder this ability. They contend that the Act's requirements for congressional approval can be too cumbersome, potentially putting national security at risk. For example, during the Gulf War, President George H.W. Bush was able to gather international support and launch a successful military campaign with relatively little opposition from Congress. Recent events have highlighted the ongoing debate surrounding the War Powers Act. The Trump administration's actions in the Middle East, particularly the bombing of Iran, have sparked intense discussion about the limits of presidential power. While some lawmakers have called for greater congressional oversight, others have defended the president's authority to take decisive action in times of crisis. As we consider the future of the War Powers Act, it's crucial to strike a balance between ensuring national security and preventing abuse of executive power. One potential solution is to revise the Act to include more specific guidelines and enforcement mechanisms, while also providing the president with the necessary flexibility to respond to emerging threats. Ultimately, the key to resolving this issue lies in Congress's willingness to assert its authority and work collaboratively with the executive branch. By doing so, lawmakers can help ensure that the War Powers Act serves as an effective check on presidential power, preventing unnecessary conflicts and promoting a more transparent and accountable decision-making process. Stay tuned for our final story of the day, right here on Barbara's Bulletin. Welcome back to Barbara's Bulletin. As we wrap up today's show, I'd like to shift our attention to some significant developments in international defense cooperation. We have two important stories coming out of Switzerland that highlight the country's efforts to strengthen its security ties with both the European Union and the United States. Firstly, Switzerland has announced plans to enter into exploratory talks with the EU on a non-binding partnership to participate in arms procurement projects. This move is seen as a crucial step towards deepening Switzerland's cooperation with the bloc, despite its traditional neutrality. The partnership would enable Swiss companies to negotiate better conditions for participating in EU defense procurement projects, potentially opening up new opportunities for the country's defense industry. Furthermore, Switzerland is also seeking talks with the United States regarding the rising cost of F-35A fighter jets that the country has agreed to purchase. The initial deal was valued at around 6 billion Swiss francs for 36 jets, but the U.S. has now indicated that the price may be higher due to increased raw materials and energy costs, as well as inflation. The Swiss government has emphasized that the fixed price remains valid, but a diplomatic solution is being sought to resolve the dispute. It's worth noting that Switzerland's decision to purchase the F-35A was met with controversy, with some arguing that the country doesn't need such advanced fighter jets to defend its territory. Nevertheless, the government remains committed to the deal, citing the importance of ensuring the safety of its airspace and population beyond 2032, when the current fleet of F/A-18 jets is set to reach the end of their service life. As we consider these developments, it's clear that Switzerland is navigating a complex geopolitical landscape in its pursuit of enhanced defense cooperation. While the country seeks to maintain its neutrality, it also recognizes the need to engage with major powers like the EU and the US to ensure its security interests are protected. That's all for today's Barbara's Bulletin. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay engaged.